We're recording.
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased to be here to share with you my dissertation presentation, Shaping Space as Information, a conceptual framework for new media architectures. My contributions that I believe this dissertation is giving this field of the media arts are: one, the creation of a new conceptual framework for the media arts titled New Media Architectures, advancing a new media architectures research practice. I will not only outline a conceptual framework, but will detail new media arts research. Three, the creation of a historical foundational timeline, tracing new media architectures, tracing those fields that led to media architectures. I will briefly go over the contents. I will read the abstract so you can understand exactly what the dissertation is about. We will then go to the introduction, then go over the history, methodology, implementation, and end with conclusions and future directions. Abstract. This dissertation is an investigation of a dynamic media architecture conceptual framework that focuses on information as the foundation of building form, shape, and structure. Starting from the notion that every material, object, structure embodies the information that enables its use, the computational platform facilitates exploring generative information constructs as ever-changing dynamic structures, comparable to the self-organizing systems found in nature. A study of forms and patterns and spaces has been undertaken for creating generative media artworks designed for amplifying the reciprocal relationship between an environment that shapes its content and the content that shapes its environment. A main focus of this research is the generation of unique forms of architecture using agent-based behaviors controlled by self-organizing systems. These unique forms of architecture determine and are, in turn, determined by the shape of virtual worlds / environments. Another important focus of this research is the investigation of software platforms that provide the fundamental instruments that produce the content and that help shape the virtual world / environments. In a series of designs, exhibitions, and studies, a new media architectural methodology is presented. Part 1. New Media Architectures Inspiration. Introduction. This section covers motivations, problem statement, methodology, and a structure of the dissertation. Motivations. Self-organization becomes a very important construct in many different disciplines, with the abstraction of flocking and swarming with the Boyd's algorithm to the computational platform. For the first time, researchers in other disciplines who did not work with complex systems and self-organization had the ability to use these tools. A good example of this is a partnership between Yannis Xenakis, a composer, and Le Corbusier, an architect. The fact that Xenakis fought with composers like Boulez in the mid-20th century to say that works should not be deterministic, music should not be organized by the 12-tone structures that most of the public did not understand. It should be natural, a natural waterfall as the water flows. The drops are random. The probability of where the water goes is determined by the landscape, the structure. This led Xenakis to incorporate a whole new mathematical structure into his acoustic work before the computational platform. But this was driven by the self-organizational principle that was present. This led to an evolution, especially in the arts and architecture, architectural worlds, to look at the spatio-temporal relationships. An example of this is the Phillips Pavilion, where the collaboration between Xenakis and Le Corbusier created built form from the composition metastasis. My personal motivations, remember, I'm educated as an architect. I did not think about space over time. However, architects do build buildings over time. This was an exciting motivation, and I think also for the field. How was I going to break out of these limitations, these structures, and start building using these self-organizational principles, coming up with new forms, and then making buildings into complex systems instead of complicated forms? This will be something I will talk about in the future directions. These points establish the motivations of the field and my own. The problem statement. What are the problems? What problems did the collaboration of Xenakis and Le Corbusier bring? How did these researchers converse with each other? How do we learn from these different techniques, from these different disciplines, to make a new field as a medium? Another problem are the technological tools. They are discipline specific. I used different software tools and my own programs to scaffold my work. I was not able to build a complete system yet. I used what was out there to build my conceptual framework. The next step will be to build the framework, a software system from the ground floor up. My work is the study to get to this point. That will be discussed in future directions. So these problems of dealing with how are we going to bring these different fields together, and how are we going to bring this new hybrid field of new media architectures where space, time, and evolution of a structure unfolds naturally. This also becomes motivations. Here's a preview of the structure of my dissertation. I will be focusing on section 3 today. As in these two quotes, we can see the researchers struggling with the following questions. Xenakis, complex systems and self-organization. Negroponte, artificial intelligence and responsive systems. In section 2, the historical background of new media architectures, we will then proceed to the shaping of spaces as information. How does one shape space as information? I'm looking at various component parts, and they are the algorithm, the key and the tool, world making, the algorithm that resides in the world, and instrument design, the space that it resides. New media architectures and shaping of spaces. What is space? And why space in itself can be shaped and informational. Referencing Radical Dimensions by Wertheim, she states, Aristotelian physics did not include a theory of space, only a concept of place. Not until Galileo and Descartes made extended space, one of the cornerstones of modern physics in the early 17th century, that this void is known as space. In the 14th and 16th centuries, artists Giotto, Paolo Uccello, and Piero della Francesca developed the techniques of perspective, originally termed geometric figuring. As one would view a painting at that time, it was as though they were looking into another world. This would be, in Wertheim's opinion, a type of virtual reality. So in a sense, the artists were foreshadowing the formation of three-dimensional space through their perspective in their paintings. In my opinion, the paintings foreshadow three-dimensional Euclidean geometry. During the late Middle Ages, under the influences derived from Plato and Pythagoras that were rivals of Aristotle, a view in the areas of the sciences began to come into place. The world abided by the laws of Euclidean geometry. This came from the studies of Galileo and Descartes. An idea of space unfolding in the real world. Galileo could show objects like cannonballs that move through space with mathematical laws. Space was an abstraction and a void that was defined by Euclidean geometry. Then Newton expanded the idea of space in the real world to space extending throughout the universe. The structure of space is a geometrical proposition. What extends space are the forces. Going forward to Albert Einstein and general relativity, this is where the forces come into play for extended space. The fundamental categories were three: space-time, matter, and force. Once Einstein solidified his theory of relativity, he found that gravity was an artifact of shaping space. The forces become important in describing higher dimensional space. For Einstein, gravity comes from the inherent geometry of a four-dimensional manifold. Moving to the 60s, physics discovered additional forces, the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force. These forces allow the move into higher dimensions. This leads to deformation of space. When a planet is put into space, it deforms. There has to be substance. There needs to be something there. Skipping to where we are now, Stephen Wolfram gives the following quote: "Space as a network. So could this be what space is made of? In traditional physics and general relativity, one doesn't think of space as being made of anything." And this is from his article, "What is Space-Time Really?" This concludes my historical background of space. Space is a substance that can be formed and shaped. Now the areas that are important in new media architectures for shaping space: algorithms, world making, and instrument design. If self-organization and the laws of nature shape space by the content residing in the environment, and then the algorithm becomes the important driver for shaping space as information on the computational platform. So as we go through this history, I am evolving my understanding of the fields of architecture, media arts with algorithms, world making, and instrument design. How did algorithmic processes begin to form world making and instrument design in architecture and media arts? Starting with Le Corbusier, Xenakis, and leading to Professor Novak with liquid architectures. We can see with Le Corbusier and Xenakis the integration of the spatio-temporal aspects of music with architecture and building design. Xenakis used stochastics and probability theory in his musical compositions. These constructs were taken up by Le Corbusier as he brought these concepts into form and shape from Xenakis's compositions, composition metastasis, to the building of the Phillips Pavilion. Let's forward to Professor Novak's work dealing with the fluidity of structure, the fluidity of shaping form, and how it can reconfigure itself with self-organizing principles. This was a definite contribution and an evolution for the field of architecture, much like nature can reconfigure itself through self-organizational principles. In the same way now with the abstraction of the flocking swarming algorithm outside of the biological field, space can be reconfigured through these algorithmic processes. It is information. As we proceed with the history, we now want to discuss those researchers who began to abstract these algorithmic processes and to use them in the computational platform. Alan Turing was responsible for the development of theoretical computer science. He formalized the concepts of the algorithm and computation. This was accomplished with the Turing machine. The Turing machine is considered a model for the general purpose computer. As the computer becomes the instrument of choice and the algorithm, flocking swarming is abstracted by Craig Reynolds, who developed the Boyd's algorithm. The computational platform and the algorithm become the instrument and the tool that is ideal for shaping space as information, which leads to the history to virtual reality and world building, which helps us contextualize what engineering and media arts and computational sciences has offered to this field of new media architectures. Multimodality, the use of human-computer interaction, gestural control for navigation, the use of visualization, and also haptics are all a result of the computational science and engineering. The field of the media arts focuses on the further senses, as well as the aesthetics of multimodal representation of information. All of these disciplines contribute a part of building this field of new media architectures. As we look back at the building of the Phillips Pavilion and we see this as a making of a world or an environment through the algorithmic processes, we now discuss the instrument design, which will begin to evolve the computational platform as an instrument/environment. As we see in this picture on the side of the, as we see the picture here, around the same time, the first HMD, which was an instrument, we begin the the Osaka Pavilion as a system developed that allows the movement of sound engulfing the listeners of a 360-degree structural environment. As you can see in the picture and the slide, and the environment becomes one and the same. Around the same time, the first HMD, which was an instrument and an immersive environment, also was being developed. This was the sword of Damocles, invented in 1968 by Ivan Sutherland and his student Bob Sproul. The term virtual reality was made popular by Jaron Lanier and later in the 1980s, after VR was used by the military for training in NASA and aeronautics. In the early 90s, VR was mass-produced both through the HMD and the caves. Marko Novak was one of the first artists to use HMDs for VR installations. His work, Dancing with the Virtual Dervish, Worlds in Progress, 1994, developed at the Banff Center for the Arts, was between 1991 and 94. Then Char Davies created Osmos in 1995. The first cave was invented by Carolina Cruz-Nera, Danielle J. Sandin, and Thomas A. DeFonte at the University of Illinois, Chicago Electronic Visualization Laboratory in 1992. The National Center for Supercomputing was being developed, and this brought the hard scientists into the possibilities of virtual reality simulations. Larry Smarr was one of the leaders in developing the computational platform and the supercomputer, eventually the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. Smarr at UIC in the early 2000s in order to build CalIT-2. At UCSD, that focused on a large supercomputing infrastructure connecting those enormous video walls. Starting in the mid-1990s, Kuchera-Morin, composer, media artist, and chief scientist for the technology for UCSB, began to design an infrastructure that integrated the Osaka Pavilion, the cave infrastructure, and the idea of supercomputational platform into the Allosphere instrument and facility. In 2006, the Allosphere instrument and the facility was completed, and its original design of a 4-pi to radian cylinder, 3 stories high with a bridge extended in the middle that will allow a team of researchers to be immersed in their data while connecting to a large distributed computational system. The Allosphere brings together and begins to integrate my 3 areas that define the field of new media architectures: algorithm, world making, and instrument design. I will move on to explaining my methodologies through prototypes. Part 2, methodologies and implementation. How did I get here? It took me reflecting on all of my prototypes and the research that I did in the 3 MAT labs, the Allosphere, the 4 Eyes, and the Translab, to come up with this structure. I will cover in methodologies the investigations through prototypes, the fusion of 3 areas that shape space as information, forming new media architectures, algorithms, virtual worlds, and instrument design. Algorithms from the virtual to the material, virtual worlds and instrument design, the environment, collaborations, and experiments. The 3 areas, as I have previously stated, are architecture, media arts, and the sciences. When looking at each one, I have identified contributions in each that are important in establishing my field. The biological sciences for self-organization and complex systems, the abstraction of self-organization, organization algorithms like the flocking swarming algorithm coming from the computational sciences. Also with the computational sciences and engineering, the beginning of multimodal interactions with human-computer interaction and scientific visualization as the main drivers. Another main driver in HCI deals with virtual environments research, which is quickly brought into the media arts. And the media arts add the other senses as well. This leads me to the sub-areas of research forming new media architectures, the algorithm, world building, and instrument design. This now becomes the locus of new media architectures, algorithms from virtual to material. Algorithms from virtual to material. I worked extensively on the Boyd's algorithm and used various frameworks and created programs. This resulted in years of research from works on flocking and swarming predator-prey models, flocking and swarming predator-prey models generations. In each project, I recreated and experimented with the algorithm, transforming it directly to become a materialized, fabricated object through data reduction. In this work, Movimientos Hermosos, I used Alice systems for the system and Rhino to analyze, prepare, and process. This is a flocking and swarming algorithm that shows flow and impedance. It is a single species that is used for the data. The flocking aspect deals with flow. There's a swarming aspect that deals with the invisible predator, the data that disrupts the flow. The next works have the same flocking and swarming algorithm, but are programmed and represented differently. The first picture was implemented in Allo systems in order to bring these virtual agents into the physical. I had to do data reduction on the system in order to fabricate the data. This next work, Movimientos Hermosos Fabrication, used Alice systems and Rhino to analyze, prepare, process for fabrication, data reduction of the points. So I went from hundreds of thousands of points to something that I can manage for fabrication. In this work, Un abrazo repulsivo de un rebaño de emociones, analysis and rendering, I used Alice systems again for the system and Rhino to analyze, prepare, and process the surfaces for design and fabrication. In the same work, this now represents the fabricated model. I fabricated the actual object as surfaces, and it's 3D printed with plastic. Note that I was able to reproduce the thickness of the flocking and swarming and lighting it with other effects. I also took these algorithms and sonified them. I used many Unix commands to do data reduction and to aid in the visualization of the data. I made a Swiss Army knife and actually figured out how to parse the data continuously, day and night, which was lots of fun. My process was to realize the natural phenomenon into form and shape. While working with these algorithms using the different computational programs, the data became extremely important. I had to choose the proper point for data reduction to make the overall shape and form. And moving to my next area of investigations, dealing with virtual worlds and instrument design, I did research in 3 different labs, the Allosphere, the 4 Eyes, and the Translab. In virtual worlds and instrument design, the environment, collaborations, and experiments, Allosphere, the Allosphere Research Facility, I started as a discipline-specific architectural researcher. Dr. Kuchera-Morin asked for assistance for the redesign of the Allosphere. We had no as-built CAD drawings of the Allosphere. This work is the Allosphere 3D as-built CAD drawings that I created, ones of thousands. I decided to make a 3D as-built CAD model to assist my colleague Dennis Atherton in equipping the laboratory and facility. While starting working to work with Dennis Atherton, I had an insight in the dilemma of equipping the Allosphere. These are as-built, but they're wiring designs for the Allosphere. I did not understand that the Allosphere was not only a laboratory, but an instrument. These drawings make it very clear to me that it's an instrument. This came into focus when I worked as a team leader for the project with the Center for Nanomedicine. This project is the CNM project, in short. I was assigned to make an animation for Dr. Jamie Marth to show how to cure cancer through the use of nanoparticles, injecting and flowing through the arteries and veins of the body to the organs, the site, to find the site of the cancer or tumor in the pancreas before metastasizing into the liver and the other organs. We had to render and create a new technological infrastructure to make this movie, allowing the journey of the nanoparticles traveling through the body. I was perplexed as I watched this movie on the computer screen in front of me. The world was supposed to be the body that I was traveling to, and yet it was confined to the box. This box, this tool, is too confining. It is not portraying a real environment. It was not until our team ported most of the data over to the Allosphere instrument, a partial simulation and partial animation, that I had a realization while on the bridge that the Allosphere was an instrument and that the environment became the body. And I was no longer confined to this box. This is a same project interior of the arteries and veins. I was actually flying through the body's arteries and into the organs, following the nanoparticles on its mission, on their mission. I can actually be inside any environment because no artifacts existed. I was completely immersed. The Allosphere was designed by Dr. Kuchera-Morin to have the facility disappear. I was in a room with no artifacts, and the content became the data, and is residing in the world. In the second lab, I worked with the Four Eyes, co-directed at the time by Matthew Turk and Tobias Hollerer. I took a step further while reflecting on the previous experience. Having a sense of self within a group user interactive experience, now I'm in the lab that uses HMD instrument, which creates environments. It is an embodied single user experience, a different spatial phenomena to explore. This is an HMD user study at the psychology building that I was a part of from beginning to end. The work done in the Four Eyes lab was similar to the Allosphere working on science, but in the Four Eyes lab, we use HCI rigor. How can we make the model as real as possible? We did many experiments using the HMD. In this study, we conducted an experiment that focused on real physical environment, which would be compared to a virtual environment. Our sites were the Four Eyes and the psychology building. The idea of the study was to see if we could fool the user to believe the virtual was real. What we discovered was the value of extended reality, using a mixture of a virtual 3D model and the real world with a camera mounted on the HMD, facilitating the best user experience of believing the virtual was the real. Questions that were brought to the fore were the following. When does the model become completely real? When can the model itself be substituted for the real experience? From this study, I understood the importance of making the model on the computational platform with the best resolution possible. Those are my discoveries from the Four Eyes, reflecting on both lab experiences of the instruments becoming the environment. The Allosphere creates group user experiences. The Four Eyes HMD is using single user disembodied experiences. I speculate that avatars would solve that difference. A further insight is that the Allosphere type of space is an immersive group user experience that will be valuable for the sciences for group user data experimentation. People are real, avatars are not. In the final lab, the trans lab, I worked with two different types of systems, an HMD and a projected-based system. The HMD experiments, flocking and swarming, data drawings. These are the initial experiments. In this lab, I continued my work in agent-based modeling studies using the flocking and swarming algorithm for navigation. This was the basis of my work in the HMD. The TransLab was the first space where I could experiment with navigation, with creation, and virtual reality in HMD. It was an opportunity to move beyond science and begin to understand this narrative, experimenting and researching the aesthetic and poetic nature of the media arts and virtual world making. Our assignment in this lab was for each of us to make individual works and then bring them together for a group user installation. VR world studies, renderings and drawings, CAD and Unity. In my individual work that was created in the HMD, we then took our individual worlds out into the projection-based system in order to unify these separate installations into one complete work. My contributions in the group work Future Tripping was for the group to use my sonic agent-based navigation and virtual objects, which I made from the flocking and swarming algorithms, as a certain selective parts for the whole of the composition. The audience then experienced these works in one of two ways, either viewing in non-stereo content on the projected walls or wearing an HMD to view each individual work in full immersion. I continued my work with flocking swarming algorithms using point cloud data and contributed these visuals. The objects and the visual part of the work, which was projected into the wall, on the walls. VR world, data moon rehearsal. In this work, I offered my data analytical drawings and flocking and swarming data algorithms. My work titled the group work titled Moon also offered us an opportunity to work with a live performer in the space, in the TransLab. My colleague Tim Wood, as shown here, experimented with improvisational dance, which was a part of the narrative of the work. The TransLab offered me the opportunity to work with these two different types of systems. And the final set of installations that I will discuss, I was able to integrate these two different systems into a whole. In the final series of works, I began to look at the spherical design of the allosphere and to modularize this into curved screen designs for different installations. The first work with the Allosphere Research Group was an installation in the Wolf Museum for Exploration and Innovation. We were given a 1,000 square foot space to begin building our first installation / instrument. In the blue atom, the data, design, and rendering, the analysis and processing for a supergraphic on the upper left, and fabrication studies. These were made in Allosystems and Rhino to analyze, prepare, process for fabrication and data reduction of the points. Being confronted with the artifacts from the projected space of the TransLab, I realized that once one gets outside of using instruments like the Allosphere and the HMD, one had to deal with the artifacts of the corners of the room. At Moxie, we solved the problem with a 100-degree curved screen, which was a third of the Allosphere curved instrument. And designing the 1,000 square foot space, we realized if we bank the corner from one side and angle it in the corner to experience, we would experience the best field of view. We painted the room super black and the room seemed to disappear with these architectural designs. We experienced as much immersion for this size. To highlight the portability of this general purpose instrument / installation, we were able to rebuild the Moxie installation within the CNSI in a lab that was approximately 750 square feet. This was currently our Alloportal instrument at CNSI. On the upper right is Kenny, and we're preparing for SIGGRAPH 2020. The image below is JoAnn immersed in the new work Mirioi, and this is a picture of Mirioi during the pandemic when we had to go in. And the last project, I will discuss my work in the final exhibition that was presented in IZEA 2019. This is ethereal atom fabrication study at CNSI. It was with Alolib, Rhino to analyze, prepare, and process for fabrication and the data reduction of points. This was Dr. Kuchera-Morin's second quantum composition titled Ethereal. It was an opportunity for me to begin focusing on the fabrication of quantum objects realized through the self-organizing principles of the time-dependent Schrodinger equation. In Gwangju, I was unable to go further with the curved screen design. We were constrained to a cubicle installation space. My colleague Kan-Yong Kim worked on the ideal solutions for total immersion in that space. This is Ethereal installation IZEA 2019 in Gwangju. Alolib for the HMD model, CAD analysis, design, and coordination to create the space. And the upper left is a picture of the installation and the HMD content in Alloportal 2. I was then able to concentrate on two important areas of my research. One, the fabrication of these quantum self-organized objects, and two, the integrating of the content of Ethereal on the HMD with a projection-based system. My specific role was the rendering of the virtual objects in the HMD, which would later take on physical form. In the implementation and the reflection of my practice-based research works, I believe that some of the problems we solved, that we solve as architects within the discipline are complicated systems, not complex systems. In these two quotes above, Professor Novak discusses liquid architectures, and Melanie Mitchell discusses the notion of information in complex systems. These two quotes are important for me because they explain the two most important components of moving from architecture to new media architectures. In architecture, moving from complicated systems to complex systems for new media architectures, and two, the notion of liquid architectures as the shaping of space as information. Point one, complex systems, as John Holland states, is not a complicated system. A complicated system can be designed and one knows its purpose. It has a final conclusion. This, according to Holland, is like launching a rocket into space. An example of a complex system, according to Holland, is described as follows. In a pile of sand, while pulling away a grain of sand one at a time, when does that pile cease to be a pile of sand? A complex system is an open-ended question. For point two, the shaping of space, Novak describes liquid architectures as fluid and a continuum from one shape to another. There's more to that, and you can talk to Marcos about that. And my design of new media architectures, those shapes as information. In part three, new media architectures, a new conceptual framework. This leads to conclusions and future directions of this dissertation. My contributions are creation of a new computational framework for the media arts, new media architectures, advancing new media architectures, research practice, creation of a historical foundational timeline, tracing new media architectures. These are my contributions to the field. The limitations that I have discovered include technological systems limitations. I had to construct a holistic system from different software programs from various disciplines. I will need to integrate this into one software system design in my future research. Working with the algorithmic processes, I have not been able to incorporate complexity into the architectural process with the self-organizing algorithms that I'm developing. Not yet. This is titled Allo 2 Concept, CAD, Analysis, Architectural Engineering Design. In my future directions, the Allosphere Research Group is currently designing a new installation, Allo 2. I will be extending my 100-degree curved screen design to extend the curve into the 360-degree space. This will facilitate a large group with that space. This cannot currently happen in the Allosphere instrument. It's going to be a cool design. Allo 2 concept, interior rendering, inside cylinder design viewing, probably, possibly. Allo 2 concept, interior rendering, inside cylinder design, viewing urban content. Allo2 concept, interior rendering, inside cylinder design, viewing the waves of the ocean. Finally, the experimentation and realization of fabricated forms, both in smaller scale to larger building scale. How do we turn these buildings, and also how do we turn these devices to project on? The CNSI was my opportunity to dream using science. My experiences at MIT was a journey to make the future present through the media, arts research, and the realization of new field through research. We still have a long way to go to make living architectures. This is the end of my presentation. I wanted to thank you. My committee, Dr. JoAnn Kuchera-Morin, Marcus Novak, and the Rock, Marko Peljhan. Special thanks to all of those who extended countless kindnesses and inspired me through the years. The MAC community, the Allosphere Research Group, and the Translab Research Group. Finally, my deepest gratitudes go to all of my family and friends. This last image is a proposal of probably, possibly, the dream, a concept installation design for the Moxie Museum or any future donor / museum. I would love to build this thing. I open the space now for questions.
Well, first of all,
yes, thank you.
Sorry, I teared up at the end. There's a lot of emotion.
That's okay, Gustavo.
it's okay, Gustavo.
Very interesting. So just with the questions, I just want to reiterate that last virtual rendering is of the hydrogen-like atom. And Gustavo's wish to be able to make this into a building like the Phillips Pavilion would be an incredible feat. And so thank you, Gustavo. I learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate the time that I was able to work with you. So now let's open it up to anybody that has any questions about what new media architectures may be, and these kinds of excavations or that we do, those of us that are artists that do by building prototypes that are complex systems with open-ended questions that usually don't have an answer until 200 years after we're dead. Anyone?
I guess I just want to say it was really good presentation, I think. And I especially like the quote from, what's his name again? With the comparison between the rocket and the sand.
John Holland.
John Holland, yeah.
Yeah, I need to read that book.
Oh, that's on the reading list for Transvergence. One of the thousands of books, but that was especially a good book. That actually got me going on this journey. And I think working with my committee, I realized that at some point you get lost, but then you find yourself through these projects. And my intuition was to hold firm with my professors and their research to try to find my own. And I'm excited to share the research and excited to move forward. And I think that for me, being emotional is just to say, you know, I think I talked to all my advisors and my colleagues 24 hours a day for years. And at some point it disappeared and I went to sleep and woke up, and I'm just so excited to move forward.
Well, the one thing that I do want to stress as the inventor of the graduate program, Media Arts and Technology, is it's been an interesting 20 years, especially bringing the two disciplines of engineering and the arts together. It seems to be, and I could be wrong, that us artists are much more like scientists. Our questions are open-ended. most of my engineering colleagues' questions seem to be more like complicated systems. They have a problem to solve, and that problem needs to be solved. What I don't want to lose is the rigor in the media arts and technology for both areas to grow and thrive and come together, which is those of us that are project-based, those of us that our questions are open-ended, to allow us to go forward to establish our questions and answers through our project-based work. Those of us that are driven to complicated systems and to kind of refine an end to what it is to doing, to come together, those people can help us to take our works into form and shape. So it's been a very exciting 20 years, and I hope to continue for another 20 years in this wonderful program that we have. So thank you, Gustavo.
Oh, yay.
Everybody
Yep.
for joining. And again, let's open it up to more questions or answers. Does anybody have any answers for me?
I need lots of answers.
Well, let me jump in, first of all, to congratulate you, Gustavo. That was a great job, and it was nice to see, all the work that you've been doing all this time. You've done a lot of things, and it's nice to see everything at once and just kind of feel all of that. One thing that I wanted to comment on is the question of perspective. Because at MAT we all use digital sound, and we use Macs and so on, and we're trying to be at the cutting edge of that, and we tend to forget that digital sound is actually quite old, and Max Matthews did things like a long time ago, and that it takes a long time. It takes decades, even after you realize something, it takes decades to actually put it in the world. So, I see what you're doing in that kind of framework, where there have been certain things that became apparent as possibilities at some point in architecture or in music or in media, that will actually take decades of effort, such as yours, to become consolidated and put into the world. MAT itself is that kind of effort, where there are certain possibilities, and then some of us have to get together and actually go from the possible to the actual, while inventing the new possible. I agree completely with JoAnn on the affinity, the sort of natural affinity between art and science versus art and science and engineering, where engineering is obviously important and obviously creative, but it is about a known problem solved in a knowing way. Whereas artists and scientists, as soon as they solve something, they unsolve it. Like the whole point of the scientific and artistic effort is actually to find the solution, only to defeat the solution, so that you get to the next one. And I think your own efforts and struggles through all this time have been to do that. And as hard as, and I know in the same time, I just want to give you credit that in the time that all of this happened, you also faced real hardship and difficulty and heartbreak, and you persisted and you prevailed. And that's also part of it. And I think through it all, the thing to congratulate you maybe most for is seeing yourself through. And now that you've done it, taking that experience as confidence that if you've done it this far, you can do it again and again and again as you go forward. I tell everyone who comes to MAT to do a PhD that the credential is one thing. It's a good thing. It's fine. But the real issue is a personal transformation, that you will exit a different and fuller version of yourself than the person who arrived, that you will become empowered to go into the world with, like 007, license to do things. And this is your day. This is when you get your license to go out, not to kill, but to make the world better.
No, I actually wanted to put a shout out to The Rock, Marko Peljhan. I remember there were some days when I was in his office and going, what am I doing here? I have no idea what's going on. But he actually talked about his life, his struggles, and then actually what his research was about. And it really opened my mind to cybernetics, the idea of these complex systems and how we can live in these different environments as signals, as radio waves, and how we can project into space and become, I don't know, eternal. And there were some readings and movies that we covered, and in the end, I needed someone like him to hold me firm. So anyway, I wanted to thank you guys.
Thank you, Gustavo.
Thanks, Gustavo.
Does anybody have any more questions? Because at this point, we must dismiss all, and the committee must meet and convene what our subject matter is going to be when we talk. So if anybody has any more questions or answers, you know, please chime in. Else, please dismiss yourselves and the committee will remain. That includes, and well, Gustavo can stay until the committee says.
Oh, no, I was about to say, Helen, thank you very much. You made this all possible.
I just want to thank you all. It was such a pleasure to be here, and I've learned so much in the presentation, and I'm very proud of you, Gustavo. I recently watched a very good program between Bohm and Krishnamurti, and it turned into being more revealing Bohm's experience with Einstein, and that they had a discussion between quantum physics and relativity, and Einstein said, they can never intersect, but you are my spiritual teacher.
Believe me, those physicists move forward on faith.
We move forward on faith, and I think you've moved forward on tremendous faith and understanding. I can see that I could ask you what was the most challenging project and what problems were the hardest to solve. But you've done so much on this path. I can't believe you're now a half a century. Congratulations on you have been just masterful and persevering, and I'm very glad to be with you today.
Hey, Helen, I was a child when I met you, so we'll continue to be children.
You're still a child, boy. Wait till you put 20 years on that.
Thank you so much. I'll leave now so you can do your business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, so as soon as everybody, unless anybody else has something to say, it would be great if you can go so that the committee can come together and convene. I'm going to stop the recording now, Gustavo, okay?